Hi everyone, welcome to season one of Football and Finance, episode 12 with Joe and Nash. We're back, summer holidays over, Euros disappointment is done, Lee Carsley's in the job, so it's definitely coming home, and the transfer window's just shut. Nash, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I thought, did we not do one after the Euros? Has it been,
Yeah, we did actually. We did one after disappointment of another, I think it was
oh,
back in July.
yeah, their transfer window is shut. I haven't been as following it as much as close as you have, to be fair. But yeah, some interesting stuff that's been happening. I think a little bit muted, might say, in this
Things are,
cool off.
no one has money.
Everybody, everyone's inflation has hit them, and they said, "Okay, now that inflation is a little bit low, that doesn't mean I'm going to go out spending all my money."
it's I think it's kind of real when you're looking at all the Barcelona having to like let Gundogan go on a free and all these other to register players. I know they've got their own mess going
That
on. And
really hurt me. I was like, how Man City just going to get Gundogan like that? Like, he's so good. That pained me.
it's the world that we're in right now, though. Like you're looking at this, we're in almost a new era of the transfer market, whereby I think the eras of the profligate spending from various state-owned club, rich billionaires, oligarchs, etc., has kind of been wound in, and also the commercialization, whether it's in terms of corporate sponsors that had driven and propelled football, has kind of started to not slow down, but hit a sludge. And this kind of sludgy period is what we're seeing, where like the biggest transfers, I think the highest transfer was Julio Alvarez, wasn't it? Julian Alvarez to Atletico. That was the highest where cash changed hands because Mbappe was a free.
Yeah. Well, he's getting 500,000 a week, so let's not ignore that.
But but yeah, what are your thoughts or takings? Because you're looking at clubs now trying to offload players on big salaries, whether it's Chelsea trying to get rid of several, whether it's Sterling, Chilwell, Lukaku, or you're looking at Arsenal who are trying to get rid of guy just signed for Crystal Palace,
Nketiah.
Nketiah, who was on not big money but 120k, trying to shift that across other clubs in the league. I think Nottingham Forest pulled out because they just couldn't pay that on an ongoing basis.
Mm,
What are your thoughts on this kind of new era of, I don't want to say smarter and more supervised spending, but definitely tighter purses?
Prudent.
Prudent, yeah, that's probably a better word.
uh, I'm not sure. I hesitate to call it a trend or a new era just yet, just because we've had one window where the price wasn't right for a lot of clubs. I think that there's still multi-billionaires in football and state-owned sponsorship that will spend the cash, I think, at the right time. Um, if they're going to see, hopefully a return on those investments. I think it's maybe more to the way that people have been looking at players as either assets and liabilities, and in a way that they approach and spend them. Whereas maybe previously it was like the value of players is always going up, so I don't really care. Like, not that I didn't care, but you can sign someone for 100 million because you will sell them for 150 almost. That's kind of how it felt um, before. Whether it's a new era, I'm not sure. I think it may just be, maybe, yeah, profit and sustainability rules that are maybe kicking in and people are trying to avoid because they can see what's happened with the likes of Everton and Forest and maybe Leicester and all these other bits. So they're kind of looking at it and saying, I don't want to be that club that's made an example of. And so they are, yeah, trying, trying, trying to stick more closely to the rules in that aspect, and that's maybe what's calling a cooling off of it. And just generally, like, how much more could be pumped into this? Like, how much money more is there left for football to like consume, like, in terms of like as a sport compared to, yeah, even I know there's other sports which are bigger in terms of like if you're doing it by per player, like
Yeah,
money that Steph Curry makes in the, but the league is very very small, like in terms. And then if when you look at the other basketball leagues around the world, there isn't that kind of money. So you could argue say yeah, the NBA is bigger, the NFL is bigger, but in terms of like a global sport, that the money that's exchanged from South America, Europe, Middle East, even like clubs like North America, like it to me that shows like how, and obviously around the popularity, but just like how much money is in it. Whereas the NFL franchises are huge, but they're concentrated, in terms of like the money around football is much more spread in terms of pretty much every country has got a professional league that is worth value.
it's an interesting one, especially from like a transfer market period where teams are having to do so many like swaps and trades of players for value. I've never seen so much like it's almost like an NFL NBA, like you're trading this player apart from you're getting the player in a pick. Yeah, like I've never seen so many swaps for a little bit of money or trades or contract terminations for people to walk and all this type of stuff, which kind of makes me think maybe we are moving into an NBA model where you have your flagship players, you have your LeBrons and your ADs who eat up most of the cap, and then everybody else are just pieces that are put around them. And the hope is you, whilst in the NBA model, you draft well, in the Premiership model, you pick up a couple of players for relatively decent amounts, whether it's Malo Gusto or players that you bought and you didn't think they'd be as good as they are, who kind of actually complement to your crown jewels. So I think that's the bit that's a bit interesting for me. And I think one of the things I read was there was an interview with the CEO of Brighton where they were basically talking. I think Brighton have spent like 200 million in this transfer window, which is nuts. Like, I hope they put it all on their Amex points from their sponsors. They'll be around the world at that time.
Enough free lounges, yeah.
Enough free lounges for all these players. But the thing, when they interviewed them, they said Brighton's kind of sweet spot for player transfers really 30 mil. They don't really like signing above 30 million pounds. And that's because for them, they think there's more money to be got at. So what you were saying about sign for 100, sell for 150, they believe they can sign, if they can get it under 30, they can flip that in 2 years, 3 years for 60, regardless of what amortization they've done, and make quite healthy profit. But at the same, if you flip that, I feel clubs are actually looking in a 20, 30 mil mark because they're looking at players kind of like houses that are undervalued on the street, where you're just like, maybe if I do that loft and do that kitchen, that house balloons because the street actually commands 2 mil, but I'm buying it for 850k. So I think that's what we're seeing, and that's what I kind of think we're seeing, combined with the PSR, like you said, and also the fact that they sweated the asset so much that you now start to you're looking under the sofa or under the pillowcase at what other cash can you find to actually fund your spending without success, unless you're Man City, where you just keep winning. So you win the league, that allows you to buy more. You win the Champions League or you make the semi-final, that allows you to buy more. But if you're not Man City, you're kind of in the constant world of what are we doing financially anyway when it comes to transfers.
Yeah, I think with them looking at this, them looking at players as more of a financial asset, probably is around like, I think of, are people on the thing, do people feel it's like the Galactico model works, where you just get you spend the most, you get you get the best talent,
Mm-hmm.
and you in all positions, and you pay them the most because they're of most value?
Oh yeah.
Or are people kind of more inclined to believe that, as you said, maybe a marquee player here or there,
Mm-hmm.
who's like maybe top 5 in their position sort of thing in that season. And then there's other people who are value for money. Like you can't have a player you pay him 300 grand a week, but it's giving you 7 goals and 2 assists. Like, do you know what I mean? With respect, like, so that's where it's like, and I think with people, there's been a lot of people who they've thought that those players were going to turn into, you know, or were bought on the basis that they were going to be 20 goals a season, 25 goals a season, or, you know, contributing this way, contributing in that way, and they haven't really produced that level. So it's kind of like, is it easier to, you know, buy well, in the Chelsea strategy, it seems like, is it better to almost buy people who maybe don't have a name, or maybe kind of want to achieve something and haven't achieved something, and then being able to pay them less than market value when they win, and then when they start to win, you know, offload them for a higher price. One of my thoughts around it, because I don't think you rarely ever see a dream team like win, if that makes sense. Like at the time, people reminisce about teams, like people reminisce about players who were in a team or in a squad, but at that time they were not thought of as, you know, the greatest. But it's only with hindsight that it's like, oh yeah, Sylvain Wiltord, he was a don. It was like, not sure, like, but it comes to fruition now, like many like years later, that actually having that squad rotation player who you weren't paying massive bucks for, who was like a Trossard or whatever, who wasn't have on big money, just, you know, serves you well. So
it'll be interesting to see, I think, where we go next year, because I think you raised a really good point about it's just this transfer window. There's been loads of different kind of contributing factors that have made the transfer window the way it is, and that could change. You could say the Euros ate into people's time to do a bit more analysis, and like Sir Alex always said, don't buy big players after a good tournament. Like maybe a lot of teams have started to listen to that and been like, yeah, maybe let's not side the Zubimendi guy off one game.
Nico Williams, he's a done, to be fair. I decided him after one game. That price was a bit too rich for me, but
hey, to be fair, talking about people like Nico Williams, I'm surprised that he's a player that Chelsea didn't go after, like our club closest to our hearts. They've obviously had another interesting transfer window. Well, I think I don't even know how many ins and outs they had this season, but as in, like, they've spent a fair chunk of change if you look at it in raw numbers in terms of players they've signed, but not actually including the player sales. So Chelsea again spent big. I think the average age of their squad is about 22 now. They've signed more young players. They've managed to get people off their books. So, what are your thoughts in a transfer window that has been fairly quiet, and Sky have tried to hype it up as much as possible? I know big name signings, and
they don't have any incentive in doing
that. and Chelsea have gone on the massive offensive again. What are your thoughts on, obviously, Chelsea and their? I think people were saying the squad was 42. Like, people are gonna have to get changed in the car park and another in their own cars.
Yeah, I mean, the managers talked about, you know, my squad size and the players I'm working is X. The rest of them ain't my business, ain't my problem, which is ruthless. I think it, yeah, Chelsea are the kind of front runners in the player asset strategy, which is, yeah, accumulating younger players, paying them kind of mid to low level market rate, if you want to call that, in terms of wages, in a hope that, you know, they will grow and be superstars one day, and being either offloading them for more money or being like, oh well,
that didn't work out.
That didn't work out, so but it didn't cost us anything, so whatever. I think a lot of in the news has been about like this, like the squad rapport and the sentiments between players and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, I think like most of these people are just professionals and they get on with it. Like they'll just do what they need to do. it goes more to the fact that people are treating this more like a business, and the more assets I have, the better I'm like able to protect myself against downturns in my circumstances. So with that, I can see. I wasn't quite sure on the Sancho deal because I was like, I know he's younger than Sterling, but I was like, getting rid of Sterling, great. Getting his wage off the books sounds like a good deal. Then bringing in Sancho with that, I think I always seem like it might be like one of those, again, the property analogy. You bring him in, refurb, and then 2 years sell him for like 40, 50. If we had him on loan for a year or two, with an obligation to buy 20, 25 mil, something like that.
Yeah, as long as we finish 14th or higher.
Okay, yeah, but it's
So basically a done deal.
We hope.
Or we'll finish 15th, so we don't have to buy it. The Sancho one's interesting, and I think what's just happened. So the window closing yesterday. It'll be really interesting to see what happens going forward over the next year, because I think clearly, and I guess the challenge from certain football fans is they feel they've not had access to the senior leadership or been brought on the journey, whether from the people side or the financial side. But kind of on the financial side, you and I have discussed this. When it ain't your money, you don't deserve a say. That's always my view. Like, I'm not going to take advice on how to spend my hundreds and tens of millions of pounds that I've earned from someone who's contributing. I think season tickets, F&B contribute like 15 to 20% of most football clubs' total revenue. So, right,
fans also drive broadcasting rights there. Like, without fans engaging with that,
you're right. But these on the fans that drive broadcasting rights, not in the stadium.
That's broader fans. So
yeah, that's broader. Yeah, that's someone living in Mexico City or someone using IPTV or all these other sites. But the thing is, what that would be quite interesting is they came in and set out a 4 transfer window strategy, where the aim was to reduce the wages, to clear everyone off this 300k coasting 250 grand salary, to put some kind of wage structure in place similar to the NBA and baseball, because they could see you're just getting to a point where the salaries are just getting too large. And it'll be really interesting with like Real Madrid, how they keep in 3-4 years when these people are coming up for renewal. Oof, I'll be really interesting when you're trying to pay Camavinga, Chouameni, like Bellingham, these guys, you're giving them revised contracts, how you're fitting this all in. But that's Real Madrid's top brasses to think of. But they said they were going to do a 4 transfer window strategy. They've spent 1.2 billion, which is like, I think I calculated that can buy 11 streets in my borough. So you could buy 11 on 11 streets. You could buy every house, odd and even, and you would still have change. Think about how many houses on the street. On my street, there's probably 150 houses.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it goes up to like 75. It starts at 1, and then you've got both sides. So you could buy 12 streets in the borough of Merton. So like that's how much money they've spent in terms of just pure property. If you were to like zoom out on your Google Maps, you're like, you can buy all these streets and you still have change in your pocket. So now they've spent 1.2 billion. The aim will be to spend much less going forward. And there's obviously the discussion in the background about the way they paid and bought players, whether it was Eden Hazard, Willian, paying third-party agents, and that there's some form of punishment coming, because I think the CEO of the Premier League, Richard Marston, said that we're coming to the end of the assessment on Chelsea's incident that they were investigating. So that will draw some type of penalty in some shape or form. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to spend going forward, because they've almost been fueling the market. To take out all their spending, the transfer window, both in the UK at least, and most of Europe, has been pretty low. So from a Chelsea perspective, I think it'll be nice to not see 7, 8, 9. Like, there's only so many youths you can buy. You've got the players you wanted, and the amounts they've got them for are all fairly reasonable. But I think the challenge will now be to how you sell players that you don't want to keep, based on what you said earlier. If you're using the asset accrual of young players, the ones that don't work out, Axel Disasi, How do you actually? I'm being unfair. Like you can't. Like it's been a season, but a person of his ilk, how do you get them off the books when they're on a 7-year contract but on a low salary, which he is, and other clubs know you want to sell him?
It's difficult because you don't want to play him to to show him how what qualities he has. Uh, I think there'll be people willing to take a punt because I think everyone's kind of if people can. I think for a lot of people, it's the wages maybe more so than the actual um, transfer fee. I think a transfer fee can be as like amortized over the length of a contract. Obviously, I think it's up to is it 5 or 6 years now?
Yeah, they changed it 12.
They changed it. Um, so I think that you can still do that. There'll be I know Saudi have kind of they're even reining in their kind of big spend and trying to bring more youth through from their side. You've got all the different yeah around you. There'll be somebody who's kind of willing to pay, but you might not get the level you want if people know that you want to let them go. You know, it's simple supply and demand, isn't it? But if there's nobody out there, then if there's not centre backs that are you know that are good, or you think actually the deficit that they have can be complemented by someone else in your squad because they do this better, and well, you know, people will do their analysis and get to where you want to go. It, yeah, I can't really see it being like it's very rare for like players not to be sold who don't want to be a club or not to be used in some way. So either he doesn't get sold or he gets used, and that's
I think one of the thing that is like, what's that famous saying? Like, comparison's the thief of joy. But in this example, comparison's actually the benchmark that enables you to set your price. Because if you look at it, so if you take one of England's best players at the Euros, Mark Guehi,
great. Yeah.
yeah, Crystal Palace are asking for 70 to 75 million. What that does is it becomes a marker or a stalking horse that clubs can measure their centre backs or their player against. So if you're a Chelsea, you might turn around and be like, okay, if Mark Gray is a 75 million centre back, right? And we believe that the difference between Gray and Disasi, like he's not as good, but he's like 60% as good as Gray. You will do the calculation based on the Gray number and say, okay, so 60% of 75, so that makes him a 44 million pound centre back in our eyes, based off the Gray number. So it almost creates that false floor, and it actually becomes a form of exclusion, because if that's what people use to set their prices, as well as transfer market and all the other valuations and fair market value, what that means is if you're a club that doesn't sign 44 million players, like I just used the example of Brighton, where they go for that sweet spot of 30, Brighton instantly will never, not never, but instantly are unlikely to be a future suitor for his services. So I think that then becomes a very clear, distinct, obvious marker. And if we use wingers with the amount of Chelsea have bought of like the 20 to 23-year-old, you can see that price point is really like high 40s to 60, which is obviously 60s your Nico Williams, and your high 40s is like someone in the Premiership that may shows glimpses, or maybe a Mr. Diaby who's just gone. I think he went to Saudi Arabia. So like you'll get your 45s to your 60s, and that's kind of where you're pitching at, unless they're like elite of the elite, where they're probably going in a bit higher, 80 million. But I guess for Chelsea, it'll be interesting to see what the next transfer window holds. They've done all the spending. They've sold players they needed to sell. They've managed to get players in that I didn't think they were going to get. But it'll be interesting to see now. And I guess one of the things that kind of grabs me is, as well as Chelsea's success on the pitch and the players they've been able to attract, how much is that due to the fact they're in London, one of the most global and cosmopolitan cities, as opposed to being in Everton, imagining in principle that Everton had loads of money?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think with Chelsea, it's a somewhat of a history. We've talked about the fact that a lot of the players now have grown up and seen Drogba and Terry and Lampard and Robin lift trophies there. So it's got some of that history that maybe people in the 2000s had when they wanted to sign for United or whatever. Um, London is a huge attraction for pretty much anybody who wants to be in a metropolitan city, which, according to population size that keeps getting bigger, seems to be like a lot of people. Um,
Yep.
a lot of people want to live in the countryside. That's fine. A significant portion of society want to do that. But there's a lot more people who want to live in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and London is it. You hear it every like it's iconic, So when if you're a kid growing up anywhere and you hear about London, of course your your ears are gonna prick. You're gonna be thinking about, oh yeah, I'll be able to go to Buckingham Palace. I'll be able to, I'll be able to go to Oxford Street or Oxford Circus. I'll be able to go to Wembley. I'll be able to go to all these little Michelin star restaurants that you can't get anywhere else. I can do this fashion. I can jump on a train to Paris because Paris is closed, or it's in vicinity of other really cool cities like Madrid or Milan and all these other places which you can get to relatively easily with all the different airports. It's the financial center of the world. So, well, I mean, people will talk about Wall Street.
Hello. Yeah, yeah. It's
People people talk about Wall Street and other maybe places where there's tax havens and China and places in Russia which are big, but London is up there. So as an owner or as an investor, you kind of maybe want to be around that expertise in like finance, commerce, accounting, all that kind of stuff. It makes sense to be in and around London because you can attract those people. And yeah, I think for anybody, it's an exciting time. I think maybe if you're from London, you're like, oh, you might not see it that way, or if you're, yeah, maybe if you're a country person that's like, I want to be out in the fields and I want to be able to. I don't want any neighbors and I don't want to hear sirens and I don't want all this stuff. But it players themselves when you think of things like Palace or Fulham. We also got QPR, Charlton, Millwall, even though that wouldn't be for me. But there's clubs who are gonna just have just one more thing on their CV, isn't it? Do you know what that differentiator that makes it like you more marketable to that person, to that player or that agent to be like, well, yeah, you could go and play for Hull or Scunthorpe, I don't know Hull, or Wigan or
mate. They've won an FA Cup. That
Blackpool, but bro, you're gonna get Cheshire Oaks, or that's gonna be the closest shopping experience you're gonna have. Yeah, it's just not. And in some ways, it is. It feels like does feel somewhat unfortunate that the country is like that. That there's just kind of this massive hub that um, people have gravitated towards, and then the other kind of places don't get that much love. But I can that's the way it is. So I can see why players would be attracted and owners and other people in football.
I think the polarization, like you described, the divide between various cities, it's kind of like I get the advantage, but it's also quite concerning because you look at certain clubs. I think there was a stat by a Championship club that on average they have to offer at least £2,000 per week to persuade a player to join them if they're a club outside London. So if you kind of take that number or that statistic and imagine it's 2,000 a week to persuade a person to go to a London club in the Championship like QPR, comparative to if they had to go to a club in whatever Burton Albion. So they have to pay an extra £2,000 minimum. What does that look like in the Premiership? So if you're not from one of those big football religious cities where you're Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, etc., and you're just from, like you said, Ipswich. If Ipswich want to recruit a player, and
Oh,
Chris,
it's a bit too far.
no, but I do think it does play quite a big role. Like there's that analogy that was made about, I think, was it like Robinho? It was like a footballer in the early 2000s where they got transferred. I think it was actually Aguero when he was going to Man City. They told him he was going to Manchester, and he thought he was going to United, and he didn't really know it. And then turned up and was like, "Oh wait, there's another club." Obviously, that's all worked out. He's second, third top Premiership scorer of all time, or wherever he ranks, won loads of stuff. But on the other hand, it could have gone south, and he could have been like, "Oh wait, I thought I was signing for the team that wore red." So there is almost that that indifference, and what that indifference then does mean. Like I went to a wedding last week in Edinburgh. Shout out Toto and Alice. And when we were in Edinburgh, I hadn't been since I was maybe like 22, 23 when I worked there briefly. But I'd forgotten how much cheaper Edinburgh is to London. So went to a restaurant, got some food, whatever. You can get a mojito for £7, right? Mojitos or cocktails in London, if you manage to get it sub £12, 13, £14, you've done well. So £7 in Edinburgh. And I'm thinking that's the difference in just cost of living on food and drinks, etc., all that type of stuff. That will be replicated in Hampden Park or Celtic when you go in to buy a burger, or you go in to buy a beer compared to Arsenal or at Emirates and Tottenham Hotspur. So their revenues will always be like, I appreciate stadium sizes and all those different optics as well as contributing factors, but just the difference in the socio-economic and political factors actually manifests itself in football, that the divide just gets larger.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening in the country, isn't it? It's just been replicated in football.
In football,
like the Southeast has generally been a lot wealthier than the rest of the country, based upon, I guess, initially when, because London didn't used to be the capital of England. It's moved. I can't remember why it was.
really.
Yeah,
That's bad.
I'm gonna have to go through my medieval history, but yeah.
What it was? It'll probably be something like the middle, like strategic.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Now that I think it just makes sense to, if you're, and I always talk about kind of, it's a global city, like so many people from so many different parts of the world. Like you can find a home here if you're Venezuelan. You will find Venezuelan community, food, things that you want, things that you need. You will, if you're Rwandan, like you will find. So naturally, people want to gravitate to those sorts of places. If you're,
do you think that the Premier League then, I would say the FA, but we know where their position when it comes to governing anything. But do you think some type of body should then try and restore the balance and the natural advantage the big clubs are, you've obviously got heritage clubs, but big clubs that are based in large global cities. So try and recalibrate that, whether it's via TV broadcasting money. I know they do it by position, but then maybe if you're a non-large city club, you get an additional amount, because otherwise you're going to see an actual separation, especially as we move towards like squad cost ratio and all this type of stuff. There'll be a point where, like, you look at how much Palace, their top defender earns 90 grand, and then you look at Ipswich top defender, appreciate they've just come up from the Championship, so it's not really apples and apples, is on 44, and that's a massive wage for Ipswich, but that's what Palace are giving their top academy player that they think is going to be the next Zaha.
No, I don't think that. I don't think
Hang
that.
them out to dry, yeah.
I don't think that there will be incentives which disadvantage the London and the Southeast, given what it means to the country globally. Because I think that those clubs, maybe I'll get some hate, are going to be leaned upon for their kind of global reach and their connection and their expat connection as well outside of it. So it feels as though if you were to incentivize that, then there'll be some backlash from those, the London and the Southeast, like they wouldn't have it. And you know what happens when a few clubs decide to get together and say, we don't like this.
We're out.
We're out. So that would be the fear or danger. I mean,
Yeah.
I could imagine that's what the London clubs. You'd have the London Alliance, which sounds like something from the riots a week ago. But yeah, there'll be the London Alliance.
Yeah, we've kind of seen that manifest this week. Like, you probably didn't watch it, but no, I didn't watch it at all. Like the EFL Carabao Cup. So I didn't know that it's now seeded, and it's really weird. And obviously they didn't really explain it. And I had to go like, why is it seeded? And it was like they seeded it because of the way the Champions League runs and the new format and all that stuff. That the clubs competing in Europe were at risk of having clashes with the competition. So what they've done is they seeded it so they won't have those clashes. Invariably, what it's meant is people have said it's created an even more unfair advantage because you're saying you can't draw some of the big clubs together, and some clubs that are a bit smaller say they've missed out on paydays because of how the algorithms are done for the auto drawing or the way they're drawn out, etc. So you can already see it, like they've made compensation to benefit 6 or 7 teams to the expense of the other teams in the league, 14, plus all the League One, League Two teams that may have made good runs into the competition. So I guess that's the kind of concern that manifesting based on what you just said, of like, if you come too hard on them, they are essentially the crown jewels in the drawer of English football.
I guess I'm feeling, is it like, you know, where people are like, oh, we can't tax the rich because they'll leave. You know, you can't tax people who like earn a certain amount because they'll leave. Yeah, and maybe that's, I probably don't believe that sentiment to be as true as people fear it to be, but in this, there has to be some balance of, like, you know, acknowledgement, yes, that there are certain clubs who are maybe providing their fair share and of exposure of bringing finances in as well, but it can't be that one-sided where we're just hamstrung by the fact that these are going to leave, therefore we give them everything.
You raise a good point there. You can't tax them because they're going to leave, but you can charge them. Just ask Man City with their 15 charges. So you're right, you don't tax them, you just charge them for various infringements that they've done or they're believed to have done, I guess, because we're operating on the innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah, they're guilty. Joking. I don't want to see by Man City, so let me know.
I mean, it's weird. Like, this might be both the most interesting. I know every year everyone says it, whether it's Sky Sports or BT, as they're trying to sell a package, or like for you to get Sky Sport, BT Sport. They said this will be the best season ever. I actually think this season, generally, and I think it's probably the one and only time I may ever say, may actually be the best season ever. Footballing and non-footballing. Footballing, because if City win 5 leagues in a row, at what point do you start calling the Premier League a Farmers League? Because I'm just saying, we said it with Lyon, we said it with Bayern Munich, we said it with Luxembourg. At what point does this become a Farmers League? I'm just saying, that's the football side. On the non-footballing, they could win the 5th Premier League in a row and then get the maddest sanctions for these alleged charges that are now being reviewed or due to be resolved by an independent panel. But the thing that kind of blows my mind is, like, before we kind of even jump into City, how they got themselves into this, even the number of charges at 115 are wild. It's 5 charges that they just breached a ton of times.
Yeah. Like, repeat offenders.
Yeah. And I almost feel like when I speak to football fans friends of friends who are talking about how City able to like break these 115 charges. They're usually Liverpool and Arsenal fans, and the reason why is obviously they've got the most to gain. If they get stripped of these titles and relegated, suddenly Arsenal have a Premier League title they haven't actually have to win, and Liverpool like all this type of stuff. But it's literally 5 charges: financial accuracy, how they paid managers and players, their compliance with the UEFA regulations, which they've kind of already been done for, and they kind of bust that case, but a little bit more.
They got fined, but who cares?
But that's why I say they bust the case, because the fine is petty cash for them. PSR, so the Premier League's profits and sustainability rules, and cooperating with the Premier League. And ultimately, that one I kind of feel is the weakest. Were they ever going to cooperate with you? If you're investigating them, that one's a given. But
yeah, I thought they kind of incentivized that if you cooperate that you'll get less of a sentence, not that you have to cooperate, but maybe, I don't know the bylaws particularly, but yeah, the regulations on that.
You do get a less, I think.
And what's cooperating? If I respond to your email within 3 days or within a week? Like, how does that look?
So I think the corporation, I could be wrong, and I can check it for our next podcast. I think corporation is when, I think in this sense for them, it was like kind of, in law they have a saying, obstructing justice.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of obstruction that they did. They put more roadblocks in the way to stop the Premier League doing the due diligence and the investigation they needed to do, as opposed to not put anything or take things. They actually added more, and that's why the corporation is not doing anything that would make it harder for them to do the investigation. But that's what they did. But I kind of said, like, is that not who would cooperate though? Like, I'm just thinking about, do you know what I mean? It's like, you think about any type of charges or anything. Most people, I know we go, oh yeah, let's cooperate.
It's for you to prove my guilt, not for me to tell you.
Yeah, and I think that's that. You need to prove their guilt. So
the thing is, if you, like in court, if you do say you're guilty early, you get the third of a sentence knocked up. So they're thinking, I'm just gonna bust case. I don't want a sentence. And
when you've got legal fees, like was it that quote you pulled out about the owner saying he's happy to lose 30 mil, whatever, like on legal fees, just like that. Like, and I think that's the thing that will be interesting. And also, I think the mad thing is like,
do you really expect a resolution? As in, I expect a resolution, but if it's not in Man City's favor, I expect an appeal and this to continue and continue.
So the thing that's mad is, I actually don't know. Do I expect a resolution? I personally don't think they'll get caught. I think they'll get a fine. So if we take the 5, they'll get something for the corporation. That one is indisputable. They probably have done shit. The evidence that they have from the emails that got leaked to Der Spiegel, the German paper that was used, was obtained illegally. So it wasn't like someone hacked and then it landed in a newspaper's lap. And also the email doesn't have enough of a chain to allow you to, first of all, it was obtained illegally. That's the big thing. But even if you could circumvent that, there isn't enough for you to build a profile. The emails imply things and say things, but they don't categorically aren't admission of guilt. The manager and player remuneration.
Circumstantial.
Huh?
They're circumstantial.
Circumstantial. That's the perfect term for it. So I think they'll bust the case like the UEFA one, but they'll take some penalties. Like they'll take, whether it's like a two season transfer ban, 50 mil fine, and 15-point suspended sentence. And if they commit another infringement within a year, the 15-point. This relegation all the way to League One stripped them. Like the thing is about it is, when I was looking at the 5 charges that break out to be 115, some of them date back to 2009-10 season. Do you know what you were doing 14 years ago? This is so 14 years ago. So
wait, 2009. I think I was in Plug, Division Street, getting 3 VKs for £5.
I just want some guy who's giving you the ins and when trainers were getting dropped. I assume that's a club or bar.
Yeah.
So Like,
yeah, it seems it has been a long time, which is reflective of our justice system generally, that everything just taking a long amount of time. They're not going to. I don't, I don't feel as though they will receive a relegation to like Juventus did, because there isn't that kind of element of corruption, and
that
and so the kind of nefarious nature that Juventus had when they were doing their thing, it was like, oh no, you man are doing
bribe
dodgy.
the whole season.
Yeah, like, so I don't see that happening. Like, when is it like I'm trying to think what's the best analogy, where I guess they were trying to find loopholes, I think, or maybe that's that they'd argue. Whereas I think it what they were trying to find loopholes in order to kind of bend the rules, but kind of the flagrancy of them, like, you know, you're an athlete and you took steroids and everybody knew it was a steroid and you were like popping them daily. And it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels more like they were trying to bend the rules consistently, but like, you know, over and over again in order to take it to their advantage, rather than, you said, like paying a referee or or, you know, betting on their club to lose or something like that. Well, that, yeah, you're definitely going to go to the bottom of the pyramid, for that, if not banned for life.
And I just think also with their level of wealth and the links that the club have, although not confirmed, it's the brother of the king that runs the clubs. Does the king have any involvement? Like all this type of stuff. Let's not be insulting her royal or his royal highness, like it'll splurge in his name. I just don't see how the Premier League won't get tied up. And in both litigation, like you said, I know the process is an independent panel, so three really experienced cases. How they won't just get tied up in some form of appeal, or the Premier League will have their financial resources, regardless how wealthy they are, bled to the point that they then have to negotiate a not even a settlement, because it's not really a settlement, but negotiate an outcome which they then have to sell to the people as a victory. But internally, City are popping the Bollingers and the Tattingers and the sweets.
I feel like their influence, say, either with other nation states and other significant stakeholders of the Premier League, shouldn't be underestimated.
Oh, you're calling out C-suite guys that take hard. You're going after big people now. You're saying
that's what I feel like. If I had that level of power and influence, like, and could, okay, if you punish me, there is definitely a way I will be able to get you back, because I am who I am. You know, does that make sense? Like, and so you would the Premier League risk that? I'm very much going into conspiracy theory here, but if, let's take, for example, Premier League wants to punish Man City, blah 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 blah, and then it's like, and then what's coming up is its next round of broadcasting deals in some Middle East countries and the UAE, and, you know, places where they have more influence than others. Like, all of a sudden, I start to like Bundesliga and and La Liga and Ligue 1 a bit more than than I like the Premier League reason. I don't know. I just got a feeling that.
The influence within football is beyond football. It bleeds into like senior people, and I think the thing that was quite about that is I read somewhere that some of the people who are cited to be involved in this are really senior executives at Man City, of course, in football and in society. So this is, you're not just calling out, and also, let's be honest, the owner of Man City, as a royal family member, is not going to be taking a stand or being called to that hearing. Neither will he give evidence. The king ain't giving evidence to nobody, and no one's calling his name or even uttering his name in that case without facing some heavy kind of lawsuit in some shape or form. So they're almost going to have to go on the evidence being airtight. And the thing that kind of blows my mind about this is, even I almost feel, sometimes they say that saying that, like, even in a victory is a loss, in a loss is a victory. If the Premier League win, let's say for some week they manage to win the 115 charges, or the five actual charges, or some of the charges, right? What does that say about their ability to govern the Premier League clubs? Because some of the stuff happened in 2009. It took you 15 years to bring them to justice. Like, I'm turning around as an external and going, guys, I know you won, but think about it. It's like a person commits a murder, or that's a bit too harsh. Somebody does a bit of tax fraud, right? You think they've done tax fraud, you ask for their accounts, you're looking at all this stuff, they're shirking you, the accountant's on holiday, all this type of stuff. You go around a rigmarole for over a decade, you manage to get them in front of a judge. Judge goes, yeah, man, that's tax fraud.
In that time, they've invested in Apple and Google.
Yeah, that's that, and I know it's a silly analogy, but I think, like, there's no situation that Premier League come out good at. If they lose that, they've corrected two massive L's, like for Man City, and the L they're gonna try and give Chelsea. If they give them a transfer ban and all this type of stuff, like Chelsea have just signed players till 2055. We're good for the next 20 years. We've got academy players to hold it down. So, like, you then look weak, and the call for the independent regulator becomes even stronger. They're like, you've got no control.
I don't think that even the independent regulator thing solves the problem with the club like Man City, because again, this is way out there and it would never happen. But say if these man just like, you know what, the barrel of oil just went up a bit, or the tap's running a little bit, we've not got the amount of reserves that we used to have, and I know you guys really depend, and Russia isn't really doing their thing, so we're spreading it up. We're really, really thin on the ground when it comes to oil at the moment, so we're just gonna have to give you a little bit less. Oh, and you see inflation going up again, because those sort of things are what matters. So while I'm not saying that Man City getting fined by or being punished by the Premier League
oil reserve. And then,
but I think that's the level of influence these people have. So, like, don't like, they have to be very careful of, like, don't cut off your nose to spite your face, almost, in this situation, because there could be other areas in which they want to either expand or develop partnerships, or work with in the future in that particular growing market. And then I was like, oh, remember when we had our little thing and we tried to get away with a fine, and you were going for points deduction? Hey, remember me, my friend.
It's exactly that. That's where my head was going. And it's also the external. So it's exactly that. You're going to have to do business with these people at some point in some different guises. But it's also the fact that from a PR and reputation perspective, there comes a point where this case just begins to look noticeably embarrassing and unsavory for the Premier League. You're trying to go out and get global sponsors. You're like, this is the best league, best domestic league in the world. It's one of the most commercially attractive and exciting sporting and entertainment product. And I'm seeing all over the news, Man City versus the Premier League. Our Casey review is at an end, or Man City appealing decision on Sky Sports, CNN, Al Jazeera. It does start to soil your product. So there almost comes a point where it's like, you may do more damage to your product to get Man City.
And that's where it's like, the Olympics, a couple of Olympics ago, or maybe before we were born, people were like, well, this is just doping. Everybody here is on drugs. Like, and so people didn't care about it. Do you know what I mean? And then they had to kind of clean it up. But with the football side of it, I think what makes it a bad PR move is that very few people actually know about regulations or take the time to care about it. As long as you're not, and they've seen Man City play beautiful football, be one of the most entertaining. Like, I don't think people would say, "Oh, my days, a squirrel just nearly broke his neck." Sorry, but I don't think people will look at Man City's team or the players and say, like, "Oh, they don't deserve it because of the way that they've played on the pitch. So you're fighting this like war on how it's kind of run as a business, and that for most football fans, maybe people are getting more into it now, but they're not really that bothered about it. To be fair, I don't think. Obviously, you've got the rivals who want the downfall of another club. Like I get that, but I don't think like generally people are just like it would be similar if this happened and it was Barcelona and that kind of Messi, Neymar, Suarez team, if the same things were going on, and it's not actually that the same things are going on, it was just in the other event where like their finances were so poorly mismanaged at that time during that period, that people are like, oh, it's okay because what was on the pitch was so beautiful, like it brought joy.
And so Barca, did they
exactly.
them? Did they take points away? They just got registered players, so they had to start freaking letting Gundogan and letting all these players like Messi walk for free and stand on the podium crying because they can't sign contracts.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't really see that. I don't think it so they're not going to win the PR war irrespective on this one. It's kind of too late for that because of what it's about. Like, you know how some people will bust case because and everybody know they did it, but they're but that some people will be like,
it wasn't him.
The evidence is pointing to this, but actually the people are deciding based on this basis.
This is why I feel like it'll be almost decided by public opinion, and I think what's interesting, you mentioned it in one of our previous podcasts about the associated party transactions. So the lawsuit the City brought against the Premier League. I think that would be a really interesting, like a precursor to this, because for those who can't remember, this was the case around the discrimination of City's ability to fully exploit the commercial relationships and sponsorships available. If they win an element of that, that almost becomes a pretext to a lot of the stuff that they talk about around financial accuracy, their impact around profit sustainability, because they will almost say your discriminatory policies basically disabled us or hamstringed us from being able to access this additional revenue, which meant we may have even won the Premier League back then, and we may have won the Champions League earlier than we won it. So you actually owe us in lost earnings and lost league titles, where Pep finished 5th in his first season or whatever it is. We would have won the league that year. You actually owe us Premiership money for that. You owe us the TV rights money for that, and the Champions League place we didn't get. So I think it becomes very, very, very complex to the point that I'm kind of thinking City are just gonna sit in the room and wait them out till they peak, and then they'll come to the table and take what is on offer that they believe is appropriate.
And probably get settled. Maybe there's.
But the thing is also, if they settle, this then answers one of the other question about one reflection. So the way the Premier League is set up, clubs can't sue each other, but they can go. The independent commission can determine damages, so they can say, actually, the year you won the league, you actually stopped Liverpool winning the league that year, and that was the year you did a lot of manager and player remunerations. We believe that's to the tune of 60 million, and City either have an option of paying it, appealing it, etc. That will open a can of worms. Like, if I'm Chelsea, I'm like, the Carabao Cups you took from us.
Carabao Cups, you really want them?
No, like,
yeah. Everyone will be building their case.
Everyone will be building their case.
You know that time that we got hammered 5-0 by Man City that caused us to go down? Everyone would be doing it.
Relegated teams, I didn't even think about them. If you got relegated by 3 points, 2 points, and you drop points at City, you'd be like, we would have stayed in the league. We're now in League One. That relegation cost us
double relegation.
Yeah, we never recovered. We spiraled down into League One. So City are responsible for that. So it opens up this kind of worms in a way that I just don't think they've fully done that scenario planning where they've sat in a room and said, what happens if City win? What happens if we win? What happens if nobody wins? And off that spider diagram, what are all the other options that can come off that? What if it's a full City win, partial win? Maybe they have, because I think that ultimately, and this is where it's like they say, be careful what you wish for. I hate Arsenal fans. Yeah, strip them, relegate them to League Two. Yeah, give us our titles. Da da da. That might be the first domino effect that starts Super League. You relegate City, or you put on a punishment that they don't like, or they think it's too severe. If I'm Sheikh Mansour, I'm calling a press conference to the City fans, going, guys, like, look what they've done. We can't play under these terms. A22. What's that? European Super League. JP Morgan Investment still. Yeah. Send us the fixtures. That might be the domino that triggers that. And let's not pretend all those other clubs who were involved initially, all those people that came to kill Caesar, not praise him, have put their daggers away. They've dashed their daggers in a gutter. All they did is they put in a box. When it comes time and they get it's time, that's when you'll see people come out of the woodwork. And I think that secretly, if you're City, you might win. It might be win-win. They relegate you go to the Super League. They give you a mediocre fine. Premier League look weak.
Yeah, and I think that is an aspect to it. Of that's what I said. You inevitably have to work with these people moving forward, and that's the difficulty of this. Is not like me. I get personal injury from somebody because they bumped into my car, and I've got we will never have a relationship again. And so it can get as messy and as grubby and as nasty, and I can get a medical examiner to say I've got a lifetime of stress because you didn't put your indicator on, blah blah blah. In this situation, you're gonna have to deal with these people for the foreseeable future. So what is that relationship going to look like moving forward, and what is that demonstrating to the others as well? So you're talking about the dominant Super League. When the others see this, and there are people, it's not just Man City who are acting in ways that maybe considered if you know anything about academy football and and all the different parents who may have got this and all these different things that be happening, like the inevitably, like they want to be able to go about their business in the way that they want to, and they won't necessarily have they'll be looking at that relationship thinking, oh, that kind of that kind of soured for something that we thought they were close partners and allies and collaborating and in the same direction with, which that's why I kind of said before many times, the Premier League is not like the NBA and NFL where everybody has a joint vision to win
direction,
pulling in the same direction.
They all pull in the same direction. All the NFL owners and NBA owners, they're all in the business of making their product more lucrative, more valuable, which makes them all wealthy and richer. And this is where I think sometimes people don't understand the dynamics at play of what are the long-term impacts. Because I still think, maybe I'm being cynical, I still think that people think the European Super League thing is gone. Like we spoke to the top six, we gave them concessions, we threatened them, we gave them the carrot and the stick. They know not to do this again. They know not to do this again in the manner you told them not to. You need to tell them to never ever consider, in their heads, like, oh, we're never going to do that again. Yeah, of course, we can't do that, but we can do this new product. This is different. It's got a different name.
And so it also depends on the way that people view you. Like, my opinion of you can change in terms of public opinion, and therefore those things with hindsight now seem actually unwarranted, unfair, and not in the best interests of football. Because and people's perception of that can change. It's like women's football. At one point in time, people were like, nah, women's football, that shouldn't be allowed. We should ban it, the FA. And look at it now, where people's perspectives on it actually, if people want to promote women's football and be involved in it and it should be good. And then people might say, actually, if people want to set up their own league and do their own thing and not be connected to this person, we live in a gig economy where I can go and I can work for myself, or I can do this, or I want to be like a self-made person and plot my own path. Why should I have to be part of the Premier League if I'm then how like just changing the narrative around like the perception of these different organizations makes your rules look like they are sanctions, or they're
Precise.
or they're punitive,
Yeah.
rather than helping to grow the game. So and those opinions can shift over time, over like fan bases, where it's like, oh yeah, people should be able to join what they want, leave what they don't want. Why do I have to stick to this if it's not something that I'm like enjoying? And so yeah, I can see that narrative building in certain circles.
And also, I think the final thing that kind of crossed my mind that I've been thinking about for a while that I wanted to kind of run past you is what happens, right? So I think the punishment comes out before the end of the season. Like punishment, the outcome comes out before the season's over. So what happens, like obviously with Everton and Nottingham Forest, they're really quick to make sure they got everything ironed out. The asterisks, is it definitely 6 points? Is it 3 points? What are we doing? If it's relegation, this is what I mean when people don't follow this through and they get relegated, they appeal and the appeal's upheld. What is the appetite to play the rest of the games, and how will that affect the league season? If they find out with 6 games to go that they've been relegated, they've appealed, they've lost, they've done an emergency judicial hearing with CAS, they've lost, and they got their last 6 games, I'm not turning up. I'm messing up the league table. I'm not saying I would, because like my morals wouldn't be to do that, but there is no incentive to play the games. You're already relegated. You might as well just academy kids. And
at that level of elite sport as well, like it's fractions, isn't it? It's if you're not giving just 0.5% less than you usually give, you're going to get punked. Exactly. So like, and that sort of thing will change your mindset, and you could easily drop a percentage point.
And then at the end of the season, Ipswich and Southampton stay up by the 3-1 win they both had at Etihad, but they pumped freaking Bournemouth 6-0 the week before the hearing outcome. Like, you're going to be like, hold on a sec. Like, those victories, we need a replay. And likewise, you can't go to Pep and be like, oh, Pep, why is Haaland in the stand? Oh, he's ill. Oh, what does he have? Oh, he's got the flu. Can we get his medical records to see that he has the flu, hence why he's not able to play? There's all this stuff at play where you've got, and this is where you said that they're all intrinsically linked. I don't know how you can punish them and there be no blowback on you, whether in terms of your credibility, the integrity of the matches they play. Like, they may send academy kids to Champions League. They might be like, we're out anyway. Or they can actually do, if you win the Champions League, you don't need a qualifying spot. So they could play the Champions League in the Championship.
No, yeah.
Could you imagine? They're playing Burton Albion on Monday, and then they play Athletic.
All of the slots, all of the championship slots. They're Friday night games.
Yeah, they'll be on all the EFL, Sky Bet championship slots. Man City versus Burton Albion. I know we're both being facetious, but I just don't see how people don't like use the historical examples we have to look at the impacts and the narratives and the outcomes that could come. But let's watch this space. Maybe they go get relegated 3 leagues below, and you and I can go watch them against Sutton United.
Hey, come on. And Wimbledon.
KFC Wimbledon.
What?
Yeah. 9,000 seats, Haaland under the lights. I don't even know 9,000. I don't even know how big that stadium is, but a couple of thousand.
They'll probably end up just buying the whole thing. buying all the teams in the league.
Oh, and then they go up automatically.
Yeah.
Without playing 46 games.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be fair, anything's possible. But we'll watch the space. I mean, Premier League started, transfer windows over, Champions League due to kick off, new Champions League format. We can talk about these home and away games and the way they've structured it next week, which will be quite interesting to unpick. But watch the space if whether City is still playing Premier League football next season or whatever, or the A22 started and we're suddenly traveling midweek. We're going away to Turin on Saturday, and then a week later you're in Madrid.
I don't mind it. It'll give me an excuse to do on these weekend breaks with Renee. Babe, I think we should go to Barcelona this week. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, great. Chelsea are playing.
You don't accrue that many points from those domestic travels.
Hey, that's okay. I mean, one or two of them I could drive, if I'm going over to PSG, just little.
Wow. One of those driving to France. You do you. But anyway, well, I'll let you go. We'll do this all over again next week for episode 13. Thanks for sticking with us. And any comments, any feedback, any topics, any person that Nash may have insulted at the FA, Premier League, feel free to at him.
I don't insult anybody.
Okay. Any commentaries?
Create my downfall here, bro.
Any commentaries that may have been raised related to your area of expertise in any of these organizations? You've got his name, to add.
Come and chat to us.
Us, you. You. But thanks everyone. We'll see you soon. We'll see you next week.